Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Welcome to PILS, the Philippine Indigenous Languages Lecture Series hosted by the UP Department of Linguistics. This is part of the celebrations for the Decade of Indigenous Languages. We are streaming live on the official UP Department of Linguistics FB page as well as the department's official YouTube channel. So before we begin, please consider reaching out to one friend whom you think would benefit from today's session. Today's session is on serial verb constructions. PILS is one of the programs in line for the celebration of the 100th founding anniversary of the UP Department of Linguistics. That is a century of deepening our roots through the documentation and description of Philippine languages. We invite you to join us in these celebrations, which will peak at the Philippine Linguistics Congress on August 23 to 25, 2023 at the NISMED Auditorium in UP Diliman, Quezon City. The deadline for early bird registration is on July 31, 2023. We have also pre-conference workshops scheduled for you. These are scheduled the day before on August 22, 2023. The pre-conference workshops aim to introduce conference participants to different contemporary methodologies in linguistic and language studies. We have workshop sessions on analyzing judgment studies, on developing foreign language teaching materials, on processing acoustic phonetic data, and on methods for engaging communities in language development. But today, we are happy to have with us my dear friend, Rinj. Ryn Jean V Gonzales, also known as Rynj, works with SIL Philippines in language assessment and documentation, community-based language and identity development or CBLID, literacy and education, and participatory methods training. Since 2016, she has also been involved as a consultant facilitator for regional and division level Indigenous Peoples Education or IPED programs, particularly in the development of the four minima for mother tongue based multilingual education implementation. Currently, Rinj leads the Itneg Inlaud Language and Culture Documentation Project, covering the Itneg Inlaud Indigenous Cultural Communities or ICCs in the provinces of Ilocos Sur, Ilocos Norte, and Abra. She is also working on a grammatical description of the language for her dissertation under the PhD in Linguistics program of the Department of Linguistics of UP Diliman. Today, she will talk on serial verb constructions in Itneg Inlaud. Hi, Ridge.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
All right, so Rinj is going to share her presentation for all of us.
Don't see it. Can you see it? Can you see my presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes, it's okay.
Ayan.
Here.
Okay. So, can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagdalo sa lecture na ito. This is my first ever venture into the realms of serial verb constructions actually. And medyo challenging siya and I'm a little nervous then, but also excited to share with you what I have learned so far from my study, which is based on 47 recorded speech events and elicited sentences from my Itneg Inlaud teammates from Ilocos Sur and Ilocos Norte. In this presentation, I'll be straight to the point. I'll be giving just a brief introduction on Itneg Inlaud and serial verb constructions. Then I will immediately proceed to characterizing SVCs in the language. And after a brief summary, followed by another brief conclusion, we will have a Q&A. Study of serial verb constructions may be situated within the topic of clause combinations. Payne frames clause combination as a continuum moving from one clause to becoming two separate clauses. In this continuum, SVC would fall near the end where single clauses belong. From this end, you are moving from a high level of grammatical integration of verbs, forming one clause, to a less grammatically integrated level where you will have two distinct clauses. In between will be various types of clause combinations with different levels of dependency. Aschenwald and Dixon said that SVCs have been reported in many of the world's languages from various typological profiles. There is so much variation in the features of SVCs in different languages around the globe that it is difficult to make a generalized statement. According to Haspelmath 2019, only a restricted definition of SVC can be proposed for comparative purposes, giving this narrow definition. A monoclausal construction consisting of multiple independent verbs with no element linking them and with no predicate argument relation between the verbs. Labstrand integrated the views of various authors with this next definition, which reads, serial verb constructions are when two or more verbs can be said to be in the same clause, but not morphosyntactically marked for coordination, subordination, or complementation. For a language-specific description, Haspelmath is encouraging linguists to advance a definition based on their in-depth study of a particular language. He said linguists should feel free to simply advance a definition and then work with it. If the resulting work turns out to be interesting and productive, then the definition has proved useful. And that is exactly what I hope to achieve in my study of Itneg Inlaud serial verbs. For those who are not familiar with the language, Itneg Inlaud is a Meso-Cordilleran language that is closely related to the Kalinga group of languages and a sister to Binongan, Itneg. Itneg Inlaud is spoken in the provinces of Ilocos Sur, Ilocos Norte, and Abra. In 2003, SIL recorded a population of 9,000 for the Itneg Inlaud. The language is considered threatened with an IGIDS level of 6B, but there are speech communities that have even lower vitality, especially in Ilocos Sur and Ilocos Norte. However, there are ongoing language development programs, which includes, of course, the Indigenous Peoples Education Program of the Department of Education implemented in Region 1 and Abra. There is also an ongoing language documentation and description uh, that we are implementing. And in 2022, the Philippine Bible Society published a Bible translation of Itneg Inlaud. There are two general types of serial verbs based on their component verbs, the symmetric and asymmetric types. The symmetric type is composed of verbs from an open class of verbs. The SVCs in Itneg Inlaud belong to the asymmetric type, where one verb belongs to a restricted category while the other is unrestricted. There are also several semantic types of asymmetric SVCs. Itneg Inlaud is one of the most common type, the motion type. Polly and also call motion verbs the serializing verb type par excellence. More specifically, Itneg Inlaud has the directional subtype wherein the verb expresses a path of motion, go and come. So in Itneg Inlaud SVCs, the motion verbs in, mapan, and umali of the orientation of the path of motion or direction to the actual event. So the first verb in the series, referred to as V1, are the motion verbs, and the second verb in the series, referred to as V2, is or are the main verbs. The V1 occurs before the main verb, indicating a change in location. and this is also referred to as the prior motion SVC. The directional verbs like come and go contribute their deitic meaning or orientation of the path of motion to the other verb or verbs. The V2 in Itneg Inlaud is the main verb. Some would refer to it as the semantic head because it encodes the main event and bears the marks of morphosyntactic relations with the arguments. Specifically, the V2 defines the temporality, transitivity, and or the voice of the event. In this study, I adapted Payne's concept of inflectional paradigm applied on Waray verbs, wherein modality and transitivity affixes are considered basic affixation or paradigmatic. Only one of these is required and can occur for the verb to function as a predicate. I think that's all I can say about this in this presentation, but I'd like to say that it works for Itneg Inlaud and it makes a seamless and elegant glossing in my opinion. Also, I would like to note that I didn't mark my verbs according to the voice system. Instead, for a more typologically consistent analysis, I also adopted Payne's applicative paradigm presented here, where after voice is equivalent to verbs marked with intransitive inflection. Patient or undergoer voice is marked with transitive inflection and with no applicative affix. Locative or recipient voice is considered transitive with applicative inflection and finally, conveyance or benefactive voice is also considered transitive with applicative inflection E. Affixes E and an are not considered inflectional because they can co-occur with intransitive affixes and in both irrealis and realis modes. Moving on, I will now present to you my initial findings on Itneg Inlaud SVCs. Discussions on SVCs typically center on verbhood, clausehood, and linking and subordinating issues. Here are the most salient morphosyntactic features and parameters for deciding on Itneg Inlaud SVCs that affirm the status of the lexical items in question as verbs and provide evidence for its being a single clause and a single complex event. So these are verbhood, contiguity, linking and subordinating, temporality sharing, sensitivity sharing, argument or argument sharing, one polarity value, modification, forms an imperative as a unit, can be questioned as a unit, and nominalized as a unit.
So the first criteria for deciding if a construction is a serial verb is to make sure that the constituent lexical verbs are actually verbs, because some forms could be adverbial or those that have grammaticalized into, although we don't have prepositions in Philippine languages, but it could there could be something like that. So to make sure that an SVC is a real SVC, you have to make sure that they are really verbs and that they can stand on their own as independent words or predicate. In Itneg Inlaud, being an asymmetric type, the concern for verbhood is focused on the motion verb. Based on examples 1.1 to 1.3, the motion verbs can really stand alone, and so they form valid serial verb constructions. However, we notice that. Wait, let's go back. However, one of the lexical item we have here, the in, no longer carries any inflection. This is evidence that it is farther along in the grammaticalization, grammaticalization race. Another thing that is essential in figuring out if a series of verbs are actually serial verbs is that um, Yeah, although we say that there should be no coordination or linking between the verbs, but it doesn't mean that there can't be any other element between them. In Itneg Inlaud, serial verbs may be contiguous, as in example number 1, where the verbs are side by side, or separated by other elements in the clause. The elements in the clause do not include, of course, conjunctions or linkers. So the elements that may come between serial verbs include pronominal agents in example 2.2. And you can also have pronominal agent plus patient in 2.3. So nap is actually the third person singular ergative plus one first person singular absolutive combined, because it's a transitive clause. Or you can also have a person marker, which is agentive in function, plus patient. Um, this is this is something that made the concept of co-referencing in Itneg Inlaud more clearer to me, because in this example, the the pronominal argument is not agent, so it cannot attach to the verb. So there must be an agent argument attaching to the verb. So in the process, there needs to be a person marker there for the ergative argument, which is the babarito or the young men. So the babarito is co-referenced by the na, and if you notice, the babarito then it becomes oblique. So the marker is now oblique because you cannot have two agents in two ergative argument in a clause. So in between verbs, you can also have adverbial or pragmatic particles in between. So in the presence of a pronominal clitic, the pronoun gets the pride of place, or the second position after the first verb. And if you have temporal adverbs, like uh, in example 2.6, so in example 2.6, you have the kami attached to the first verb followed by the adverbial particle man. In example 2.7, nad is the temporal adverb meaning later. So it follows the pronoun, which is in the second position. And you can also have a noun phrase in between the verbs. So the noun phrase that goes here is usually the oblique argument. So in the presence of a pronoun and a particle, the noun phrase would come next. So in terms of linking and subordination, I mentioned earlier that serial verbs must not have this to be considered as real serial verbs. Uh, So the verbs must not be linked by coordinating conjunctions, as in example 3.1. So in examples 3.2 and 3.3, these are coordinated verbs. So 3.2, naagam kan awaten, this is hear and understand. So they are not serial verbs because they represent two different events. And then in 3.3, the serial verbs, although the first one, in kami ag sa San Pedro, is a serial verb, but the aglilin nemeng is not part of the serial of the verb series, because there is a conjunction in between the wenu, which means or in itneg. Also, one particle that is quite problematic or makes things difficult in analyzing the language is the nga. So the nga is a particle that connects various elements of a sentence in Ilocano. And I think it works the same way in Itneg. So nga links nouns and adjectives, as in example 3.4, nabalunga wakas, that is good day. So, and then in 3.5, it can link verbs and adverbs, like linibas da nga nimet si Jing nga basi. So they secretly took the basi. So the linibas functions as an adverb there. And it could also introduce subordinate clauses like relative and complement clauses. So 3.6 nga introduces the relative clause atadul, modifying the pilar dataldek. And then 3.7 also is nga functions as nga was used to introduce a complement clause. So tun igatu tausalem nga agpaep kan din binayong. So it introduces an argument for the igao. So the presence of nga in between verbs would often mean complementation, actually. So in my abstract, I made a mistake there. So dandanen mi pay nga mapan makisala. Dandanen there is not an adverb. So the nga actually introduces mapan makisala as a complement clause. So in 3.9, it's the same. Okay, so mapan makibulbulon is a complement of baunen. So as being a single event, SVCs is characterized by a shared TAM, or temporal tense aspect marking, according to Aschenwald and Dixon. In Itneg Inlaud, temporality is mood and aspect based. So modality marking on both verbs are agreeing because they are the same, while aspect is only marked on the main verb. And this is referred to as feature sharing, when only one is marked but the other do not carry any marking. So we can say that temporality is shared in Itneg Inlaud SVCs. So Crowley said the mismatch is a type of reduced concordant marking. So it highlights that the V1 is less specific and the V2 is more specific and has more semantic contribution to the construction. And we can also say there is transitivity sharing in Itneg Inlaud serial verb construction, although transitivity between verbs is not always symmetrical. So for example, umali, mapan, umali is always intransitive. The affix ma can be used for transitive or intransitive verbs, but so we can say it's neutral. And in has no inflection at all. But Aschenwald said that there's a study by Laverstrand that in his 200 plus languages that they studied, most of the motion verbs are intransitive. So the B2 actually bears the transitivity of the event, and this is shared by the V1. So the case of the pronoun attaching to the V1, so if you have a transitive construction, the pronoun there is supposed to be in absolutive case, but we know that you cannot attach an absolutive. But if you have a clause that is transitive, even if the V1 is intransitive, it can take an ergatively marked pronoun, and it is not ungrammatical because the the whole construction is considered transitive. And there is also argument sharing in Itneg Inlaud serial verb constructions. So argument sharing in Itneg does not fall in the most common typological categories in literature. According to Labstrand, so he quoted Crowley that it is the type of argument sharing in Itneg is probably a case of ambient serialization, wherein whatever is the argument of one verb that is shared by the other verb. So again, consistent with the second position rule, pronouns take the second position in serial verb constructions. So they always attach to the V1. So in serial verb constructions, again, the agent precedes the patient or undergoer argument. So while pronominal arguments are hosted by V1, the case feature of the pronouns agrees with the V2 or the main verb. So for example, 6.2 is a transitive construction, and umali is an intransitive construction, but it can take an ergative argument anyhow. Okay. So in 6.3, we don't have a pronominal argument, but we have nominal arguments here. And the arguments here are shared by both verbs. So as a single event, SVCs should be negated as a unit. So the negator has to have a scope over the two verbs. So SVCs only have one polarity value, hence it is negated as a unit. You cannot negate just one of the verbs in serial verb constructions. So sabi nila, maybe this is a distributional limitation ba? Because you can only put the negator in front of the verb. So, ayun. So, if there is a negator, the negator take the first position in the clause, thereby serves as the host to the second position clitics. So, there are 3 or 4 negators in Itneg Inlaud, but only adi or madi can be used to negate verbal predicates. And as a single clause, manner adverbs also have a scope over the serial verbs as a single unit. So an adverbial is connected to the verb by the linker nga. So linibas da nga nimmet. So that is the sign that the verb preceding the serial verb is an adverbial. And also it hosts the second position clitics as well. And also as a unit, serial verb constructions can have an imperative clause as one unit, similar to a declarative clause. Okay, so imperative clause involves a second person ergative pronouns, ka and kayo. So serial verb SVCs in Itneg can do this. Also, the whole construction can be questioned as a unit. Okay, so another test of single clausehood is when the SVC can be questioned as a unit, and the response. Sorry, so that should be the response. So the response would not be referring to each individual verb, but the whole event communicated mainly by the main verb. Okay, so when you ask kasanuyo nga mapan ilako, you only have one answer to this question. You don't answer it You don't answer the verb individually. And I'm not sure if this is supposed to be part of the feature of serial verb constructions in that can be compared or whatever, but I noticed that serial verb constructions can be nominalized, so be they can have the role of an argument in nonverbal clauses. So in example 11.1, a serial verb can function as an argument to nominal clauses, so like this identificational or equational clause. In 11.2, so it can be an argument to a numeral or quantificational clause. And in 11.3, it can also be an argument to an existential clause. So in summary, the serial verb constructions in Itneg Inlaud is the asymmetrical type, specifically the motion directional type. So the motion verb comes first, indicating a prior motion or change in location in the semantic space. So there are at least 11 grammatical features and parameters that give evidence to verbhood, monoclausality, single eventhood of Itneg Inlaud serial verb constructions. And these are verbhood, contiguity, linking and subordinating, temporality sharing, which is mood aspect based. There is transitivity sharing, which is defined by the second verb, and there is argument sharing. There is one polarity value, meaning the clause can be negated as a unit, and there can also be modification sharing, or so the verbs can be modified as a unit. And an SVC can form an imperative as a unit, and they can be questioned as a unit, and they can even be nominalized as a unit. So in conclusion, comparative categories used in characterizing SVCs were helpful in understanding how serial verb constructions work in Itneg Inlaud. But just like most authors said, language description can go above and beyond narrow definitions of SVC. Thus, in this preliminary study of Itneg Inlaud serial verb constructions, I did just that and learned how exciting and interesting its features were, many of which have also been documented in other languages, albeit the details were slightly different, like argument, temporality, and transitivity sharing, while a few were not so commonly discussed in previous studies, like nominalization. Since this is just a preliminary study, this can still be improved with more data and investigating other features like how evidentiality is shared. So that's it. Uh, that's all I can share with you this afternoon. These are some of my references. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryn. It's really wonderful. Thank you for putting all of these together for
Shall I stop sharing?
um you haven't yet. Sige.
Stop
You
sharing.
can stop sharing na.
Okay. Stop sharing na and
You can see us na.
yes, I can see you na.
Good job. Thank you very much, Ridge. This is really wonderful. This is SVCs, what you described as SVCs. These are not part of what we expect to like look into or to discover. Correct?
So
No,
yes, yes.
because you can easily mistake the other verb as an adverbial yung function niya or something. Did you also go through that phase? Can you
Yeah.
describe the moment when that eureka moment when you realized that these two verbs were actually a single unit?
Yes, in fact, di ba, I made a mistake in my abstract. So I thought that is an adverbial, but I already noticed that there is a difference in meaning when you have conjunctions in between.
Hmm.
But I thought this is something like, oh, this phenomenon is normal in Itneg. So I didn't know beforehand that this is a whole topic. This is a whole new. This is a whole parang topic of investigation pala that you can do
Yeah, right.
in
Sometimes you cannot know,
research.
you will not be able to notice them because you're not looking for them. You're not, parang hindi mo siya hinahanap kasi.
Uh,
But
yeah.
you see all the like the similarities in how the two verbs work. Right. Are you ready now for the questions?
Yes. Let's try.
There are very, very good questions here, Ringe. And I'd like to start with Noah's question on regional differences. So, have you observed any variation or regional differences in the usage of SVCs within the Itneg Inlaud speaking community?
I really cannot say because I haven't tried looking at SVCs in Ilocano. Uh,
Right.
but I hear them. But it
Mm,
seems like they use it in the same way. So the phenomenon is existing in both languages. And I think I also asked my Ibaloy friend if they have something like this.
yeah.
So they might have this. But I also noticed this in Kalinga.
Mhm.
But it's different when you are actually looking for it. Like I'm actually looking for it in Itneg. I have a concordance and I've been running back and forth ba parang sinusuyod yung every text I recorded that I put into Flex. So
Right.
I look at them for several times. So that's why I noticed them. But I think if you're not familiar and if you're
Mm-mm.
not really looking for it, it's difficult to see
Right.
this.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Yeah,
You know,
this
so can you answer if there are other Meso-Cordilleran languages exhibiting similar SVC features? You mentioned Kalinga and
yes, Kalinga, Ibalo. I think probably this is shared by Cordilleran languages.
mm-mm.
Probably.
Right. Okay. There is a question by Divine. She says, may mapapansin bang direction of grammaticalization? For example, in some Oceanic and Papuan languages, one of the verbs in an SVC eventually becomes a modifier or fossilized and can't be used in any other constructions, or they occur they do not occur independently anymore. So
Yeah.
constructions like gusto kong umalis in Itneg, does it count as an SVC?
Okay. So I think yung sa direction of grammaticalization, I think they are towards that. Tama ba yun sinabi ko? So parang they are moving towards that direction because like I mentioned earlier, yung in, you cannot
Right.
although it can still function as a verb,
Mm.
and you can still consider it as parang legit pa rin siya na it can be counted as yung construction na where it is involved can still be counted as a serial verb construction. But very limited na yung function niya. So, ganun lang. So, it can be for imperative. Tapos, you cannot use it or otherwise, you should be using it in a serial verb construction na.
Ah, I
And,
see. I see.
and it can only take pronominal arguments. So apart from
Mhm.
that, there is no use for that form anymore. And I noticed then while I was browsing through my when I was looking for mapan, napan, umali in my text, there is more of mapan in a serial verb construction than mapan individually. So
Right,
I
right.
thought I never thought of that, but just yesterday I saw that there is more constructions. There are more serial verb constructions involving mapan than mapan as an independent
So
verb. In
mapan and in, they both are in the V1 category, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. In and mapan are both go verbs, and umali is come.
Right, 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 right. Okay, very nice. Okay, so do we have other questions? See a question here from Noah. Have you noticed any socio-linguistic factors or language contact influences that might have influenced the development or usage of SVCs in Itneg Inlaud? So socio-linguistic factors or
Social
language contact
linguistics.
influences.
I really cannot tell. I haven't I haven't focused my study
Ask
on
the
that yet.
question.
But I know that there have been a lot of influence of Ilocano on Itneg and vice versa. But I'm not sure about serial verb constructions. Because they
Hmm.
are both Cordilleran languages anyway. So this could be like a retention or something. No, I don't want to venture into that. But since they are but since they are related languages, no, it's possible that this is a
This is
feature
really
of
where you can see langga no na the questions are as important as the findings that you 'di ba?
yes,
Yung
that's true.
knowing what to ask na because you find these. So knowing what to ask now, moving forward, is more
Yes,
important
that's
than
true.
ano.
So that's yeah. That's for future studies.
All right. How does the description of SVCs in Itneg Inlaud contribute to our understanding of serial verb constructions in a broader linguistic context? Yun bang study ni Ike and Valve on serial verb constructions? On what language nga ulit yun, Ringe?
Nakalimutan ko yung name ng language, but she and Dixon parang
Mm.
edited a volume of like typological SVC features of various languages from different language groups.
Hmm.
So they have something like that. Ano na ulit yung tanong?
Ano nga ulit yung ano siya, it's a futures question. I know it's a ano nga itong question na ito. I like questions like this. These are like framework questions. Yung how does the description of SVCs in Itneg in Laod contribute to our understanding of serial verb constructions in a broader linguistic context?
Ayan. One thing ano lang to be more specific like yung argument sharing isa
Yeah.
na yung aking mga notes. So, yung mga most common feature of argument sharing is like for example, one verb would would like for example, the subject would be carried by the V1 and the V2 would carry the object, something like
Mhm.
that. Or they have this teka lang, nasa na yung aking notes? But something like, so ayun yung parang may switch, ang tawag nila yun, yung may argument switching. So like
Mhm.
both subjects could be marked on the two verbs, or the subject could only be marked on the first verb and it will be
Mhm.
marked as object on the second verb, something like that. So
Right.
but even yung sinabi ko kanina na pwede siya i-categorize as ambient serialization. Parang hindi pa rin siya nagmamatch actually dun sa dinedescribe dun sa literature. So, because in Philippine language, like yung yung pronoun may distributional constraints ka, like it can only be it can only be carried by the first verb. So constraint yun, so distributional constraint, and walang ganun na sinasabi sa literature. So in like specifically in Itneg, so the arguments are shared freely, like so whichever verb uh, takes the whichever whichever verb takes the argument, it is shared by both verbs.
But
So ayun. So that's one. Tapos yung I don't know yung like you can nominalize it. I'm not sure if nominalization of serial verbs is even like I'm not sure if nominalization of verbs is common
yeah, so parang yung the
in the
extent.
Philippine languages. What more? Nominalization of serial verbs. Like something like that.
Correct. Yung extent ng ano niya, pagka-unit niya has not been ano pa, derived for. for questions pa siya.
Oo,
Yung, di ba
tapos
you mentioned co-referencing din kanina lang ga? How did that
mm. Ayun, so actually din, with this study, parang mas naging clearer sa akin yung inflectional affixes.
Yeah?
That's why I haven't been, parang I haven't been, parang I'm delaying my analysis of verbs because of the inflectional affixes. But with this one, so I noticed that the minimal affixes yung is really modality and transitivity on the B1. And that's enough, di ba? Enough na yun. Tapos, so pwede palang ganun. So that's the minimal. And then you can have aspect, you can have applicative, causative on the second verb. So now I know for sure that those are not inflectional affixes. So they are, but they are not derivative derivational affixes either. So, so now that is clearer to me, and now I can see the motivation. Before, di ba I had presentations on co-referencing. I didn't know what motivates co-referencing in the language. So at least now I have one evidence that it is because you cannot have uh, an absolutive pronoun attached to the verb. So
Mm.
that's why you need a place marker ba? Ano? A person marker in the ergative argument there. And then, parang nag-shomure ka dun sa ergative argument talaga, sa nominal ergative argument na naging na-mark siya as oblique because you cannot have two ergative arguments in the clause. Parang that is what, moment. So parang incidental lang yung discovery ko na yun. And I really, parang na-enjoy ko tong study na to because
Wait,
parang,
can I just say, we can really see, I feel like I'm happy for you.
yes, thank you. I know, you know my struggles
For
sa birth.
discovering it.
Di ba?
Oo. True, true. Wait muna, from Sir Aldrin Lee naman muna.
Oh
Sabi niya,
my.
congrats Rynj. Yung question, does Itneg Inlaud have a counterpart of the directional affix pa that is used in Tagalog and other Philippine languages? It seems to me that V1 supplies the meaning in what did they say? Two SVCs.
Uh, I think,
Like two
sir, oo, I actually asked that when I was eliciting for parang the forms. Di ba yung mga parito, pariyan, heto,
Right, right.
heto, hato, heto, hayan, hayun. So I remember I asked those forms from my friends, but apparently they don't have a counterpart of pa. So maybe this could be their way of
Yeah.
uh, way of way of communicating yung etong parang prepositional na ano na movement or something.
Right.
Ayun.
From Abby, Agent Santos, congratulations, Ma'am Rinj. Have you noticed SVCs in Itneg having more than two verbs in a string?
So far,
Or something.
yeah, so far I like what I have said. I have analyzed almost 50 recorded text, and there
Really?
is, but so far ano
Mhm.
lang talaga siya, two verbs lang siya. And ano lang talaga siya, tong motion directional verb lang talaga siya.
Mm.
Unlike yung sa Subanon o sa Subanon na symmetrical yung kanilang SVC. So open class yung V1,
Dalawa.
V2. Oh, and so very possible na may third verb pa na ma-involved or more.
That Subanan na was that? Did you read that from a from a reference? Yung sa Subanan
So yung sa
na
Subanon,
symmetrical yung kanila.
yeah, so I read yung sa aking friend, kay Sharon.
Okay, okay.
So parang
She did a
so
study.
it's different pala, no? Sa kanila parang you can have different kinds of verbs. Pero you can still categorize yung V1 mo. Meron pa
Right.
rin siyang semantic, ang tawag dyan, categories.
Mm, I see. All right. Sige, ano naman muna, away from the grammatical na ano na scrutiny and towards more methodological research related na ano. what challenges have you encountered while compiling, transcribing, and translating the natural speech recordings for your study? You mentioned you transcribed 50 ano?
Oh, not just 50. Actually, we have like almost 200 recorded events.
Pero you had a team, right, Range?
Yes, I had a team. We have a team. We're doing field work together,
Mm.
and but we asked somebody to work full time on the translation and transcription. So
Mm-mm.
we have a paid research assistant who we trained to do transcription in Seymour and Ilan.
Okay.
Ayun.
So what
So
is this team? Is a five-man team or four-man team?
minsan mas madami, minsan two, minsan three, ganyan. So depende who's available because my core team members are parang school heads, school principal, ganyan. So busy sila. Busy talaga sila. So
Can you talk about a little bit about that, Langga? How that form was, how that team was formed?
how the team was for.
Because Range is an SIL na from SIL, and then Range does work with the community talaga, di ba Range, no?
Mm-mm.
So how does that go?
So I met my team sa iPad workshops sa
Mhm.
Region 1. So we started working together from 2018. So up until today na, no. So pero yung program ng Region 1 iPad nag-run siya from 2018 to 2021 siguro. So during those times naging close na kami at mas yung discussions namin about the language, it went beyond na dun sa literacy materials because you can't help but to talk about social linguistics because we are talking about MTB, MLE, and the children are not speaking the language anymore. Tapos walang documentation, walang description of the language. And when it was my time na to do my dissertation, I
Yeah.
asked them if they wanted to pursue this because then I can focus my time.
Mm.
So it would be difficult if I have other things to do tapos I'm doing a project with them. So ayun, so it worked. We applied for funding. The LG is supporting us. Ganyan. So we were able to do field work and go around yung 3 provinces.
How was the how was the consent elicitation process like?
Ayan. So this is different then because my teammates are speakers of the language. But even then, you have to get the consent of the community where you would like to do your research. So we did parang community assembly to ask their permission, and then they issued community resolution that they are allowing us to pursue this work and they are partners in the work.
Yeah.
Yun. So every time we visit, so they know that this is, so they also realize naman kasi the value of documentation because it's clear na naman na they can see that children are not longer speaking the language, just nagbabanish na yung language. So they really want to document yung kanilang
Mm.
language. And also, actually, ang primary reason na to is parang magkaroon ka ng for the curriculum content ng iPad din. And also yung ma to produce yung mga necessary materials for MTB and LE implementation like dictionary, grammar,
Correct.
ayun.
Iba din yung ano, before we answer Noah's question, no? Because I met also your team. You came to, di ba? You came to
Yes,
the
they present
Mindanao.
papers.
For sa LSPIC 2023. And
Uh-uh.
iba din yung ano nila, yun parang yung passion nila coming from a community talaga who really wanted deeply na ma-document yung language nila. Tapos sila yung nag-represent ng ano nila,
Uh-uh.
di ba? It's really
Yeah,
nice.
so hindi na kami nag-co-present itong last time. So they presented
Sila na
on their
talaga
own.
on their own. Correct, correct. How was that like, Langga? Super proud
Oh,
mo.
yeah, so proud mom. And then we'll present again sa MLE conference in Bangkok. So
Oh,
it's another
wow.
parang
Good, good.
milestone for us then to contribute sa policy making in terms of parang preparation for
Yeah, that's a
MTQ.
really, really
Yes.
important na ano. That's really important. Right. So, let's answer yung challenges in compiling, transcribing, and translating yung natural speech. Maybe you can mention like the most challenging part.
Siguro doon na sa how I wish na habang siguro kasi hindi din enough din yung training kasi hindi naman talaga ang hirap din mag-train na yung maging yung sa nitty-gritty ng transcription and translation.
Right. You had to train the team pa.
So I have to train my research assistant to do
Research
that. So
assistant.
so if you are going to transcribe this, kailangan mo siyang
Mhm.
pakinggan as a whole, yung
Mhm.
buong story. Tapos maganda sana kung manually you segment it.
Mhm.
Pero pag nagmamadali kasi, sige, auto-segmentation na lang tayo. So yung machine na yung nagde-decide where to cut that text. So minsan hindi siya nag-align doon sa actual clause breaks or something
Right.
like that. Tapos yung orthography, paano mo i-standardize yung spelling doon sa super dami-dami na rin ng scribe. So like, siguro mga at least 16 hours of recording yung transcription and translation. So what I do para ma-polish siya is yung mga, kunyari, we have like almost 200 recorded texts na nasa Seymour. Yung mga
Mhm.
nilagay ko sa Flex na 50. So I was
Mhm.
able to fix yung segmentation tsaka uh, transcription nun tsaka translation.
Mhm.
So ayun siguro yung challenge because we have to archive this and syempre
For SIL, right? No.
no, not for SIL lang, but we have to archive this. This is a requirement of the funder that this
Ah,
has to be
okay.
archived and para madali, mas accessible din sa community. So, ayun siguro yung difficult doon to yung parang clean yung transcription tsaka translation. But I guess that is really impossible.
Can
may,
you
may,
imagine that we are still having this difficulty even with the technology present,
mm,
right? Imagine yung 100 because the department is now celebrating its centennial year, right?
mm,
So, yung method of collecting data, transcribing data, archiving data is very different. Was very different. We're
mm,
talking probably even 10 years ago, no, right? So even
mm.
with Seymour and Inflex, for example, we still encounter difficulties, right?
Yes, kasi ano lang siya eh. So my research assistant has to work alone din. Tapos I do another something else. So kung kaya ko siguro siyang kung kaya na kung if we have more time, siguro we can sit
And
down
more
together.
and
Ganun.
more ranges. You have
Oo,
more
and more training, ganyan, more training sa how to write your language, ganyan, ganyan. Kasi maganda din siya. So actually, yung nasa stage kami ng pinapasulat ko ng synopsis ng bawat story yung mga teammates ko. So sila Sir Nick, si Sir Johnny, si Ma'am Marites, dinivide namin yung na-record namin yung mga transcription and translation. And I would listen to each one of them and write a synopsis. So that's
Mm,
also one way of parang sila din ma-validate nila o magkaroon sila ng opportunity na sabihin kung ano ba dito yung hindi dapat i-share sa others. Mga ganun.
right, right, right. So Ringe is also hosting. She is giving a pre-conference workshop at the PLC. No,
Mm-mm.
this is happening on the 22nd, the day before the PLC. So when you're booking your flights, hotels, and registering for the PLC, registration is still ongoing. Please consider booking a day ahead so you can catch Ringe. She is doing a workshop on she's doing a workshop on engaging communities in language development. Am I right, Langga? She also
Yes,
does.
that's
She also gives workshops on say more the use of the software. Right?
right.
I'm a
Yes.
recipient of those workshops actually.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so maybe we can accommodate one last question from Sir Aldrin Lee.
Uh-huh.
This is going back to your presentation kanina. His question was in the beginning was yung about the pa na affix,
Uh-uh.
correct? Yung follow-up question niya is on the semantic relationship between the serial verb. he says it appears to be V1 or 2 for the purpose of doing V2. Are there do you think there are other relations involved? For example, V1 and or then do V2. Ganyan.
Ito, I think, yung specifically sa Itneg, ano lang talaga siya, parang yung V1, it lends yung motion and direction dun sa V2. But there are other serial verb constructions na may iba din siyang function na hindi motion. Teka lang Nahanap ko yung aking mga notes. So, may ibang may different kinds pa ng serial verb constructions. But etong sinasabi ni Sir yung V1 and then do V2. So, pag ganito siya, then they are not a single event.
Oh, you're not a single one.
They are not a single event na.
Right, right.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
So that's why you have they have a shared temporality.
So we're really looking forward to sige, do you have ano pa in other words you said?
So otherwise pala, you'll have a different like temporality value for V1 and V2 if that is like ano yun? Hindi naman siya concurrent event, yung or consequential event, something like that.
Yeah.
So mag-iiba na sila ng temporality value.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading this in a I don't know, in an essay form soon, in a paper form soon. So that we can refer to it. Di ba? Ang galing, we can refer to it. It's a study na on Itneg and ano. So we look forward to reading that, and we look forward to to listening to more of Ringe. As I've said, you can catch Ringe sa pre-conference event na before the PLC on August 2023. So I think it is a good moment to thank Ringe, congratulate you first. My congratulations is through the roof. Congratulations, Langga. Langga, by the way, beloved. Yeah. So we are presenting you this certificate of appreciation. Let me read the citation. University of the Philippines, Diliman, College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, Department of Linguistics, presents this certificate of appreciation to Ryn Jean Fe V Gonzales for delivering a lecture entitled Serial Verb Constructions in Itneg Inlaud as part of the Philippine Indigenous Languages Lecture Series organized by the UP Department of Linguistics, given this 19th day of June 2023. Signed, Maria Cristina S. Gallego, PhD Chair, the Department of Linguistics. Congratulations very much, Ryn Jean Fe. Tell muna them why you're laughing. She does not want to be called Ryn Jean Fe. So that's why her name is Ringe. So congratulations, Ringe. We look forward to having you again. Before we end, Ringe, by the way, is a classmate of mine. We're still doing our PhD in linguistics with the Department of Linguistics. If you want to join the department, the UP Department of Linguistics is currently accepting applications for its graduate programs. The department has a master's program in linguistics as well as a PhD program in linguistics. Both are going to be offered at the opening of classes for the first semester of academic year 2023-2024. This is in August. More information about this can be found at the UP Department of Linguistics official website. Join us, join us.
Yes.
And then I'd like to invite everyone for the Talks on Asian Languages or TAL 2023 number 2. This is in celebration of the centennial year of the department and in cooperation with Kaminori Foundation and the Japan Foundation Manila. We are pleased to present a lecture and a workshop by Professor Yasuhiko Tosaku, a PhD professor and language program director at the School of Global Policy and Strategy, University of California, San Diego. This is happening in person on June 24, 2023. That's a Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Palma Hall 207, room number Palma Hall 207, University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Right? Was that a room? So this is happening in person. Please correct me. Also, if I am wrong. All right. Okay, so as I've said, we wish to see you all at the PLC. That's the Philippine Linguistics Congress happening on August 23 to 25, 2023 at the NISMED Auditorium in UP Diliman, Quezon City. Early bird registration is still ongoing and is closing on July 31, 2023 on Monday. So at this point, we thank Rinj and congratulate Rinj also. Thank you everyone for joining us. We wish to see you all in person at the PLC. Bye-bye.